Hello and welcome to the Sprint52 review. This is our first 2-week sprint of this year. As I mentioned last time, we're going to be doing 2-week sprints. From here on out, we'll try it out, and if we need to adjust, we'll adjust at that time. Next slide, please. All right, so that's the overview. I'll give the sprint stats. Carol will give the community update. Dan Clarizio on the classic UI, Chris K on the service UI, Gregg B on providers, Gregg M on automate, Gregg T on platform, and Alberto on the API, and Dave Johnson on quality. Next slide, please. All right, so as you guys know, we've been splitting the repos more and more. If you look and talk, we continue to do that, it seems, now every sprint. Just yesterday, we split a new repo, which I'll announce next time. So it just kind of keeps happening here. The reason I mention that is because the pull request count kind of is going down in the main repo, but I think that's because the work is starting to get spread out into various other repos. So this 2-week sprint, we got 128 pull requests merged on the main repo. Everybody's coming back off of the New Year's break and kind of getting back into the swing of things. We had 29 bug fixes, 26 enhancement requests, 14 others, 20 tech debt, 17 refactoring, and 18 cleanup and documentation. Next slide, please. If we kind of go by area in the main repo, the biggest one there is, what is that? That's core. On the bright red, that's provider work. And then the 14, the purple, that's, I guess, the UI. Somebody breathing really loudly to the microphone. Please go on mute.
They're going around.
No, just probably good to go on mute if you're not speaking. Yeah, so we had 23 in core, 18 in providers, 14 in the UI, 12 in the blue, which I don't see the correlating thing on the right side for. So kind of a good distribution in general. You don't see any one thing being overly, overshadowing the other things there. Next slide, please. All right, across all the repos that we work on, there were 251 pull requests merged. We provide a breakdown here of the top 10 with ManageIQ, the main repo being the main one, then the integration tests, then the classic UI, then the Amazon provider, then the website, then the bot, the docs, the self-service. Next slide, please. All right, we'll turn it over to Carol for a community update.
Hi, thanks, Oleg. So for the community side, thank you. First of all, there's a blog post I put out last week to kind of summarize what we did over the past year. So if you're interested, please take a look. Then since the last sprint 2 weeks ago, since it's 2 weeks now, so we only had 2 last week in ManageIQ posts by Drew and Marcel, and they make very interesting reads. So please take a look, and if you want to contribute to this series, you can contact John Prowse. On the event side, the upcoming ones, DevConf and FOSDEM, in each event we have one kind of ManageIQ related talk. The first one is by Daniel Korn. I think he's from the containers team, talking about automation, Ansible with ManageIQ. And then the second one, Piotr Ski. I think he's from the virtualization team, working on Virt and Rev stuff. He's also talking about managing containers and virtualized environments with ManageIQ. So those, if you are attending either event, those are the date and times of their talk. And we also have a ManageIQ booth at DevConf in Brno. Thanks for those who have volunteered to help out. We'll be meeting tomorrow to discuss some details. If you're still interested, let me know. Then upcoming, there's one PyCon in India, and Aziza from QE team is helping to organize this. So thank you very much. And so we have like a ManageIQ pod in the Red Hat booth at the event. So that's Python focused, but we can still, share awareness of ManageIQ and maybe do some demos. And then there's Cloud Native Con in Berlin coming up in March. Planning has just started, so when I have more information, I will share that. We'll probably again have a ManageIQ pod in the Red Hat booth, so with maybe demos and stuff. You might notice that most of these are kind of Europe, and one Asia focused for these few months. But don't worry, there are more events coming up in the second quarter and onwards that is in North America. So stay tuned. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Dan?
All right, so Class QI PRs merged. You can see we're about a third bugs, but then got quite a bit of work done on some technical data refactoring, and of course a few enhancements got in, trying to get some things into the fix packs for the e-release. Next slide. All right, kind of in the bug fix areas, some of the highlights. Some of these were actually like small enhancements. So being able to add and remove network router interfaces, provision instances from providers views. Those are kind of little things that were added that kind of missed the release, but we're able to sneak in a fix pack. So that's kind of cool. Other things are bug fixes. There's some blocker bugs in here. Anything that like blows up in the UI, we treat those as blockers and try to get those fixed right away. Merging the timelines under a single tree, that was actually a bug that was there, but we decided to clean it up by moving them into a single tree. We really had some accordions there, but there wasn't the volume to really justify having that. Some things that were blowing up on forcing policy events to have one action. If you didn't have an action, it wouldn't work. Also some IETN related fixes, and check compliance button was broken as well, so fix that up. Next slide. On the technical debt side, ongoing work that we have, and we always have more to do, but we're making some good headway on some areas. You can see here we've moved some things into helpers. That really helps modularize the code and dry it up a little bit. A lot of refactoring going on. Kind of to note there, we've done some work in the Angular side to clean it up, as well as try to get us into like 1.6 plus so that we're ready for 2.0 in the future. So we're trying to make sure that we follow all the Angular changes that will keep us from having to do so much work when we get to 2.0. We're trying to split out some of the partials from the show partial that we have. So you can see there we moved the show PDF. I think that was like an example one to do it, but we're going to be doing more of that so we can get more to RESTful routes, get closer to RESTful routes. And along the way, we see dead code in the controllers for features that used to be there, or forms that used to be there, or views that used to be there, etc. And so when those are gone, we can remove the code from the controllers as well. Next slide. Were some enhancements that got in. Add and edit were added for the generic objects in Automate. Hawkular added a way to automatically detect the host name if it's not specified. Well, when the endpoint is not specified, actually. We're getting ready for the Ansible support, so we needed to move some tabs around in Automate area. We actually renamed the Automate tab to Automation, and we'll show you that. Containers got some update to their ad hoc metrics, make it a little more user friendly, and as always, we're always trying to clean up our images, the nodes and our icons and images in the product to make them work better. Next slide. All All right, not sure if you can see that. I thought it would see better, but that's the add edit functionality for generic object UI, and pretty funny. The first node in there is Eric, and that's the guy that wrote it. Next slide. That's where the automate tab moved. So you can see all the automate functions that used to be directly under automate are now one tab down under automation, and you'll see some other tabs coming in there in the future. Next slide. All right, and so some a little bit of minor features, but makes a little more usable in the containers area for ad hoc metrics. Get some spinners when things are loading, and some titles, nice titles to tell you what things are when you pop open those list views. And that's it on the classic UI. Next slide.
Chris?
Good morning, everyone. Just a quick update on the progress for the sprint. We've got about 100 points completed. We left a few that hadn't gotten done on the sprint, but I would say a majority of ours got delivered and merged. Next slide, please. Couple highlights. We've moved over to Webpack for the service UI. We've continued our removal of gulp, and I think we've got it pretty much removed at this point. We've added initial implementation of protractor and karma testing for better end-to-end testing. We've added the ability to sort by virtual attributes via the API. It's kind of a little example there. And we've added a few new UI elements. Next slide, please. The first one is we've added, as we start to expand to the different UIs and break those out, we've added a UI switcher at the top. Next slide, please. We've completed our redesign of the services list, making it better for the Ansible work that's coming up and just a little bit better organized. Next slide, please. And we've completed the designs for my orders and the service details, so we should see those completed, actual screens done and put into the repo at the next sprint. Next slide. And that's it for us. Gregg.
Hey, everyone. So as Oleg pointed out, we're on 2-week sprint, so it's a little bit lighter this time. I'm going to talk about some updates from containers, Google, vSphere, Amazon, Azure, and some core ManageIQ provider stuff. So next slide. So we have a pretty pie chart. The blue section is 15 and the purple is 5. So it looks like Amazon's in the lead. I think as everybody kind of gets used to the 2-week sprints, we'll see that distribution spread across the different providers. Next slide. On the container side, they added a bunch of performance reports, so a lot of new ways for reporting on performance on the container side. Next slide. For everybody else, for Google, we've got added the proxy for actually accessing a Google Cloud provider if a user needs to use a proxy to access external services. For vSphere, the VM reconfigure now validates the CPU and memory hot plug settings on VMware VMs. And for Amazon, our friends over at XLab have been working on separating out the AWS storage functionality into like a specific storage manager, really similar to what was done with OpenStack storage recently. For Azure, we're now deleting all the resources when a stack is deleted. Before it could, there was a chance it could leave some resources around, so now it's cleaning all that up. And then on the core ManageIQ side, Marcel's given the new provider generator some more attention over the last sprint, making it generate more pieces of the provider. And next slide, and I think that's it for the provider side.
Gregg?
Yeah, cool. So for Automate, one of the enhancements we got in was the retry with server affinity. So in your Automate methods, if you need to retry, you can ensure that the retry comes back to the same server. where this ends up being useful is if you've launched a child process and you need to monitor that process. Obviously, when the retry happens today, it gets put on the queue, and any server running the automate role can pick it up normally. So this ensures that you'll come back to the same server where the process was. And then a quick example usage of setting the AE retry server affinity flag. The default is that it's false, so it works the way it currently works. And then there's been a number of PRs to move some of the automate engine files around, and that's all in preparation for separating that out into a separate repo, which we're getting close on, likely happen this sprint or next. So next slide. And then as Dan mentioned, kind of the Ansible work, and good portion of the sprint, the team was involved in doing design work around creating services, running playbooks, and all the pieces around that. So we'll have some documents available for that in a little bit. And in support of that, in the Ansible Tower Client Gem, we've been adding functionality in there in support of this feature. So allowing creates where we were pretty much all read before, and then exposing additional objects out of the tower. So activity streams, projects, and credentials, and we'll continue to improve on that in support of the Ansible project. So that's it. Next slide.
Okay. Morning, everybody. On the platform side, we had 36 PRs merge. I think that's about the usual pace given the 2-week sprint change. As you can see, the majority were bugs, and I'll talk about a couple of those. Second to that is mainly refactoring and technical debt and a couple of enhancements. A lot of refactoring and technical debt and chargeback, and some more stuff in expressions as well. Next slide, please. So we've also been working on Ansible. We've done a lot of design work and started working on the process for embedding Ansible on the appliance so that it can run playbooks directly and job templates directly. We added some code, some logic there to determine whether it's available on the appliance. Working on the process for embedding it, and also working on creating a new role for Ansible, and that's in progress. That will hopefully be done in this current sprint. Next slide. A lot of work continues on chargeback. Shimon's been busy making some additional changes. I mentioned that we had support for doing chargeback for SCVMM last sprint. And the significance of that is that it's doing chargeback without metric rollups. So it's fixed and allocated costing. So this is just a refinement of the calculations. So now we're not going to charge for future hours. Example of that is if a report is run in the middle of the month and it's a monthly report, we're not going to, we don't calculate charges for the rest of the month because it hasn't happened yet. Also, after VM is retired, we won't charge for that, so we take that into account. And also, hours before, or the time before a VM was created, we won't charge for that. This stuff became more important, like I said, for SCVMM and charging without metrics. Next slide, please. Bug fix here I figured was kind of significant on central admin. There's a nuance with encryption, when you're kicking off provisioning from the global region to a remote region, and we manage the encryption keys between the regions, but there's also some data that's encapsulated within the provision request that's also encrypted, and it has this fix was to make sure it gets encrypted with the right encryption key, being the one for the remote region, so that when the request gets down there, it actually can be decrypted. Next slide. And a couple changes on RBAC fixes. So now job templates that are under Ansible Tower Provider are honored for RBAC, so that they're filtered as they should be. And also, when you're adding a new catalog item, the providers list wasn't being filtered. for RBAC. So that was fixed as well. Next slide. All right, I'll turn it over to Alberto. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Greg. So on the API side, the UA release, the API version 2.3.0 doc was merged, and that got pushed up to the ManageIQ.org site, shown in the URL here. Next slide, please. All right, so one enhancement for creating arbitration rules. We used to support the arbitration profile ID, and we still support that, but we needed to also formally support the arbitration profile references, as shown here below, where we can put a reference to the object via href or ID. So we support both signatures. Off to next slide, please. Okay, one enhancement from Aparna. Here we needed to expose the virtual attribute, the allowed tags for requests. And as shown here, you can query that with the attributes parameter, and it shows you the allowed tags for that service. Next slide, please. Also, by Aparna, the similar enhancements here was exposing the workflow class for the requests. Also, that's asked for via the attributes parameter, and there's an example here below. Off to next slide, please. Okay, we have an enhancement by Artium where we now support the copying of orchestration templates. So shown here, that's the action copy, and part of the resource being sent, sending in the content for the new copy of that orchestration template. And you'll see in the response here, orchestration template 1 or 2 was created, same attributes from the original one, but with the updated content shown here. We also support bulk operations by posting the action copy on the collection entry point. Next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, we have a great enhancement by Jillian. Chris mentioned that a bit earlier. So we now support sorting by virtual attributes, and this was also a big thanks and guidance from Keenan. But the thing to also mention is this would be sorting virtual attributes that are supported by SQL. But there's the same signature when you do a get, the sort by, the sort ordered are handled. So great enhancement. Thanks, guys. I think that's it for the API. Next slide, off to Dave.
Hey, how's it going? So just general testing over the course of the last 2 weeks, looking at some of these new features that are coming down the pipe, working through the Ansible stories for the upcoming release. You know, it's still kind of early, but, you know, anything that's being delivered, we're starting to look at. We're also investigating vSphere 6.5 support. A environment has been stood up, and we're running through the tests. So far, so good. Nothing outstanding to report just yet. At the same time, we're trying to stand up Azure Stack and just see what that looks like. That's been problematic up to this point. We're going to continue to kind of fight with it until we can run some tests against it. And then there is a backlog of maintenance fixes that we need to begin to kind of verify, and we're getting started on that this week. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so automation work continues. You know, a bunch of different work going on. You can, let's go to the next slide. Oh, it's okay. It's slow on my screen. Thank you. So nav mazing conversions finished. There was 677 specific method calls that we needed to convert. So we're now fully moved over to the test automations next generation of like a navigation library. So that a lot of good work by the team. It took a lot longer than we'd hoped. We're getting started on the collections and the widgetastic work, which is widget modeling based on the web UI. Hopefully that work will go a lot quicker now that we've been through, the navigation conversion. We're resyncing our master branch with downstream stable for the upcoming maintenance release testing. Starting to look at making all the providers generic to aid people wanting to add new provider models to the test framework, much like the development team is doing. Just general optimization to make testing faster. Next slide.
All right. That brings to a close the sprint demo. Thank you everybody for their hard work. Who helped make the sprint possible. Are there any questions on the phone or comments? I don't see any in the chat room either. Eugene's chat. All right. So if there's nothing else, we'll see you all in 2 weeks on February 1st. Thanks, everyone.